Well, that was a pretty unimpressive performance. Look, the code of conduct for special advisors is that you are not meant to make speeches on politically controversial issues. Well, that rule was broken. And then he gave it from the Rose Garden, which is where prime ministers are meant to speak from. And that's just before we even start on the story itself. Let's look at the story itself. The main thing that he was saying is that his wife had it, he may have it, and they had a child, as if that's a really rare circumstance. Remember, we were racking ourselves yesterday and this morning. Did the child have autism? It could only handle being with some of its relatives. No, it's just a plain vanilla circumstance. And yet he said that he could not find any healthcare or support within London. London's a pretty big fucking city, and he's a pretty powerful individual, like probably the most powerful individual in the country, and he couldn't find help and support in London. Come on. So then he breaks the rules, knowingly breaks the rules. Before that, knows his wife has it, right? He tests negative, so he thinks he can go back to work. No, the rules clearly state that he could be transferring it anyway, so he should be self-isolating. So rules broken there. Then they get in the car and go all the way up to Durham. Why? Because they can't get help in London. Oh, and he thinks that his house is under threat in London. Really? How many reports had he made to the police about death threats? And even if he had received death threats, which he clearly didn't state that he had, then of course someone of his stature can get armed guards at his house. It's pretty fucking clear. And what do you think? There's going to be angry mobs outside his house? I mean, in lockdown? No. I mean, apart from that little media scrum recently, it's just not happening. So anyway, they drive up to Durham, and then in Durham, he collapses and his boy goes into hospital. No surprise, they've just been hot boxing it in the car all the way from the south of England right up to the north of England, several hours with someone who's newly infectious, pouring it out into both of them. The viral loads must have been huge. No wonder. So anyway, they get to Durham. All of this, incidentally, is omitted from the story of his wife and himself as they wrote it up, because they were apparently in London lockdown all the time. Why didn't they say that they were in Durham in their stories? Because as they poured their heart out, they were worried about the threat of people coming after them. Oh, really? Again, where were the police threats? And could they not possibly have had armed guards wherever they wanted to be? Again, it doesn't make sense. And then when they're there, they decide to take a little trip to Barnard Castle to check his eyesight. Not just him by himself. No, on his wife's birthday, load up the car with the family and let's go and drive someplace which is on the route back down to London, and then get out, have a nice little day out, and then drive all the way back. Instead of waiting until he feels better, then drive in exactly the same direction. Instead of going back, just keep going to London. It doesn't make sense. It's got more holes than a whole set of sieves. And he wasn't even contrite. He didn't even apologize. He didn't even say that he'd messed up on any of these aspects where he clearly wasn't exceptional, and he clearly broke the laws several times over. And also stating on the NHS website that it says you can apply your judgment. No, the NHS website is deliberately strict and clear so that there isn't confusion and people calling up the lines. No, basically, his tone of voice was to win people over, but his content, he refused to apologize, he refused to back down, he refused to acknowledge the obvious. But here's the thing to do now, because Michael Gove and Matt Hancock and all the rest, they didn't commentate for a long time. They were watching what was going on Twitter. Everyone from the right wing to the left wing was getting angry, was calling bullshit. They didn't commentate at all, right? And they were waiting and watching and watching. And Michael Gove started retweeting some other people so that he could pull it back. And then all together in unison, then they decided just recently to go out with the same messaging. Oh, come on. What a stitch up. They know that it wasn't going down well, but they can't bring themselves to lose their boss. And here's what you must do. You now write to your MPs again, yet again. You say you've watched that. You point out all the holes and the flaws. You say we are not mugs as a nation, and you make a hell of a racket. If you've written to your MP before, as you should have in the last couple of days, you've already opened that channel. Just go in there again, because we are not having this. We look like a laughing stock to the world. They're all saying, let's forget about this and move on. It's kind of like, yeah, get rid of him, and then we can have that breath of fresh air and move on. only in that circumstance. So that's what we do now. We're not having this. Go and tell your MP and keep writing repeatedly until this man goes and they admit that they were wrong as a cabal and they were putting themselves above the whole nation, us versus them. Thank you.